So, the beginning of the King's Chamber. It's hard to give a date, really. Definitely kind of summer 2015 time, around the time that I was planning the Quest for Scovox series, which, if you don't know, was my second FA series, and it was originally made with 3.75-inch figures, but this instalment was instead made with 5-inch for reasons which I'll go into later on. But back then, Episode 3 was always going to be the Cybermen in Egypt. It was a concept that I was, I thought, why has this never been done on TV before? It seems so obvious given the preoccupation with the Cybermen, with spare body parts, and the parallel with mummification there. It just seemed too obvious, really, not to make a story out of that. And like I say, frankly, I'm surprised that it's never really been done in the TV series before, and that there's never been a proper visit to ancient Egypt, or modern-day Egypt, although I suppose there's the issue of budget there, really. As I say, the first two installments of this series, long-term viewers of the channel will know that they were made with 3.75-inch figures, and this one, if you hadn't noticed, is 5-inch, of course. The decision to do that purely was that the 3.75-inch line, died a couple of years ago, and I just thought I might as well use the 5-inch figures. They're better detail, they're bigger, so easier to animate, and yeah, they look better. We're getting a few newer figures in that range, or at least more in that range than the 3.75-inch range, which is now completely dead. We had those two new 12th Doctor figures, and I was keen to use them. I'd barely done any 5-inch scale figure adventures, really, by this point. Only before this, there's been Hulock. Before that, stuff like Genesis of the Cybermen, but that wasn't in my prime time. It wasn't properly animated. Back in the early days, basically, of figure adventures for me. So yeah, I wanted the opportunity to do more, and certainly for future installments as well. The 5-inch figures is the way that I'm going to go with this series. There is a little bit of discrepancy there between installments, between the second one and the third one. Suddenly the figures change from the 3.75-inch ones to the 5-inch ones, and this is something that I considered, but at the end of the day, I just thought as a standalone production it would look so much better if this one used the 5-inch figures. One problem that this did cause was that Professor Jones, the character that appears in this story, the original character created by me for a previous story, he existed as a 3.75-inch figure. He was always played by Indiana Jones, Henry Jones figure. If you don't know this character, I'd created him for a specially commissioned figure adventure back in 2014 called Time and the Zygons. Basically, the guy that plays Professor Jones had given me this opportunity to create a figure adventure Doctor Who story based around a place of historical interest back where I used to live in Nottinghamshire, and that building had been done up by the Heritage Lottery Fund, and so for the reopening of that building I was asked to create a Doctor Who themed style video to be shown there, and that was Time and the Zygons. And ever since, I've wanted to bring Professor Jones back. He's appeared in a couple of other things. There was The End of the Doctor, another figure adventure back using the 3.75-inch figures. And then in 2016 as well, I did a little pilot thing for his own spin-off series, The Adventures of Professor Jones. In fact, in The End of the Doctor, Professor Jones even mentions Colonel Jenkins, who would later go on to appear in this story.
Colonel Jenkins. I'm meeting him to discuss an expedition to Egypt in a few months. Sorry, but I must go.
That episode was made way back in 2014, 2015, which just goes to show, really, how far back the King's Chamber goes in terms of when the initial idea was originally conceived. But like I say, I knew I was going to do Professor Jones, Cybermen, Egypt as the third story of the Quest for Scovox when I was planning this run of episodes, so I thought, why not whack in a little reference there, and I suppose from that point onwards was when I decided that the character of the Colonel would be called Colonel Jenkins. For this story, I was going to need to create a custom 5-inch figure to, replicate that smaller 3.75-inch version, and that was always going to be a challenge because the Indiana Jones figure that I used was 3.75-inch. There was no easy alternative in the 5-inch range. But as I say, I wanted to do this in 5" instead of 3.75". So it was a sacrifice that I was happy to make, and I ended up using an 11th Doctor body with bits painted different shade of brown, bits coloured in with a black permanent marker like the bow tie, I think, and the shoes as well, and a elderly Dr. Constantine head from The Empty Child / The Doctor Dancers. And, you know, it doesn't look perfect, it doesn't look exactly like that original figure, but I think he does the job, and I don't know if viewers will recognise him anyway, given that he appeared a few years ago for the first time, and only now am I bringing him back once the channel has grown considerably in a number of subscribers and the attention that it's getting since I made those first figure adventures. I also originally planned to use the 3.75" Cybermen figures, that's the Nightmare and Silver variants, because they were only available in the 3.75" range at that time. They still are, I don't know why, God knows why. It'd be a great seller in the 5" range, so I don't know why Character Options haven't made that version of the figure. But I was going to use them. I was also going to use the Foretold figure as a sort of mummy thing, possibly customising that to create kind of mummy Cyberman hybrids, maybe using them for Jones's father as well, and Stevenson as well as that. But in the event, I had to use a version of the Cybermen, a model of the Cybermen that was available in the 5" range, and one that I had a few figures of in the collection, so that I could easily make a small army of them to use in the story. And really, it was a no-brainer just to use the Cybermen, really. I did consider briefly using classic designs, the Mondasian Cybermen, because they'd been announced as appearing in Series 10, and some of the later 70s and 80s ones as well. But ultimately, yeah, I thought the Cybus ones, they're the most recent model. I've got enough of them in the collection to make it work. And I had the corroded variants as well. That was another advantage, using the corroded variants to kind of give the impression that they've been in the pyramid for a long time and they're a bit ancient and rusty. And also I had the Pandorica Cyberman Guard figure that I could use easily for King Khufu himself. So that all fell into place very easily. But as I say, the story started off very differently because it was using the 3.75" figures instead of the 5" figures, and it was only when I revisited it later on, having made a couple of episodes of the Quest for Scovox, that I began to reconsider that and decided to use the 5" figures, and then looked at making these creative choices and differences to the original intention.
We have no time to lose. I've tracked the Scovox's energy print to modern-day Egypt. Fancy a trip there?
I think the first mention of this story on my channel was at the end of the Winner Takes All installment, the second one in the series, back when it was still going to be 3.75", and there was just a caption at the end of that story simply reading, "The Doctor and Clara will return in the King's Chamber." I'm not even sure whether it had been scripted by that point or not. That was summer 2016. Yeah, it took forever, basically, to get this one out. I think scripting kind of towards the end of 2016 / the start of 2017. It was definitely done by around Easter 2017. Another thing that happened at a later stage in the writing process was that I got my dad on board to help write the story. I'd already done a co-write with Christy Keaveney for Winner Takes All, the previous installments, and, you know, I just wanted to add a bit of variation to this one as well. And he was really great at doing the historical research. He came up with all the stuff to do with the water pump room and looking into one of the great pyramids that I could use and getting all the Khufu backstory. That all came from him. The original concept naturally came from me, from the outline for the Quest for Scovox series, and it was initially quite different. This is going back to the original idea in my head. The idea for the series had formed in 2015, and by that time we'd only seen the 12th Doctor in Series 8. So initially the 12th Doctor was going to be a bit more rude, a bit more, it's typical of his characterisation in Series 8. More dismissive of Jones and disrespectful, going about solving the problem in a more pragmatic, detached, less emotional way, and that was going to cause tension between him and Jones, because it was the first time that Jones had met the 12th Doctor after previously meeting the 11th Doctor in those previous figure adventures that I'd made previously. So that was going to be different. And then always at the end, there was that scene where the Doctor takes Jones back to see his father with a little prompting from Clara, you know, the companion, the human point of connection, the emotional person in the TARDIS duo. Because I thought, you know, it would be nice to have, well, nice to have the 12th Doctor and Jones falling out over the course of the story, but then for him to make it up almost by taking him back, disobeying the laws of time and just saying, you know, what the hell, Jones, you can go back and see your father. Just as a nice little coda scene at the end, I thought that would be a nice way to finish the story and give a bit of closure and round things off nicely. Other than that, like I say, it remained much the same really, with a lot of the history researched by my dad added into the script by him, and by about Easter 2017, that script was finished after drafts between us, collaboration. The bit about King Khufu was a slightly later addition by me, because I just thought that there needed to be some kind of villain for the Doctor to face, you know, a Cyber Leader-esque figure. I was very keen to hold back the surprise of the Cybermen being in the story up until when the story aired itself, you know, kind of halfway through, and the wall slides back and the Cybermen are revealed to the viewer at the same time that they're revealed to the Doctor and Jones and Stevenson as well. I was very keen to have that, because I thought that there might as well be an element of surprise there. But after that, I thought it was feeling a bit flat, and apart from the end climax involving the TARDIS, you needed to kind of turn things up a little bit more, another notch, and have one final twist. So I thought, you know, why not bring Khufu himself, who was like Pharaoh or something back in the ancient Egyptian days, why not have him as a kind of half-converted Cyberman / Cyber Leader figure to face off against the Doctor, to lead the Cyber Army, and just generally provide a slightly more badass Cyberman for the Doctor to face off against, just to raise the stakes that little bit higher. Once the script was complete, I started to look at the custom figures I would need, so Professor Jones, Jenkins and his soldiers. I went with using a Captain Jack Series 1 figure for them, just doing a simple boil and pop of the heads off and using some spare heads. There's a 11th Doctor with beard, and his head came from the Professor Jones body, and there was also the Marcus Scarman head that's already detachable from the Marcus Scarman figure from the Pyramids of Mars prior reset. So those two went with 2 extra Captain Jack bodies, and then I just used the John Barrowman version itself for the other guards, so I had 2 guards and Jenkins. I also started to prototype sets and think about how I was going to realise the spaces that I would need for this story, because, you know, the exterior of the pyramid is not something that's easy to realise with paper and card, and it's also very big, and you wanted to give that sense of scale whilst not doing something that's so big that it doesn't fit on the desk and doesn't work on a practical level. And there was the interior of the pyramid as well, with that sliding wall section to reveal the secondary King's Chamber where the Cybermen were hiding. I did kind of halt production ever so slightly around April, May, June sort of time, because I had an AS exam and some trial exams in other subjects around that time, but I hoped to get on with the story over the summer. Unfortunately, because I was away on holiday for some of the weeks, I was away on a school tour for the band to Germany, and an orchestral course, and various stuff like that, and I was also having to work on other projects as well that were of a slightly more higher importance and priority and urgency. So the King's Chamber unfortunately again got pushed aside a little bit, and much to my own annoyance really. As well, around this point there was a slight lack of motivation. I wasn't entirely sure whether I could do this story justice, to be honest. You know, it's always a massive thing to take on one of these for anybody that makes For Good Adventures. You'll know this and relate to this, that, you know, it's hard having to do all the aspects of production yourself, the writing, the set making, the customs, the animating, the editing. It's a long, drawn out process, especially the animation, I think, which isn't my absolute forte. It's something that I can do. Personally, I prefer the writing, and that's what I want to go into as a career. But the animating of the scenes is always a little bit of a hurdle to get over, having to, you know, choreograph those shots and the movements and how it's all going to work out, working that out in your own head before you can really actually do it in the flesh and do it justice. So it does require an awful lot of preparation and planning and patience to get the animation in particular done, and then the editing as well, and the voice recording and all of that. I did actually wonder for a time, if I'm being totally honest, whether to pull the plug on this project completely, or at least just do it as an audio adventure, because of time constraints, and because that would be easier as well. But ultimately I wanted to retain that visual element of the animation. I put up with it and, you know, just got on with the story eventually, because like I say, I want to be a writer when I'm older. I enjoy the storytelling aspect of it, and I think it's important to have the visual element, so the viewer can actually visualise what's going on, to see those characters and those settings. That's part of the storytelling for me, as is the soundtrack, the voice performances, the script, of course. It all contributes, and even though audio is a perfectly good medium to work with, it's not as popular with, well, on YouTube I don't think it would be quite as popular, because there isn't that visual element. It's not a video, it's just an audio file. It requires more work on the part of the audience, and it's less like a actual TV Doctor Who episode. And of course the aim with any figure adventure is to kind of replicate a Doctor Who episode, as if it was part of the canon, as if it's slotted between a season or episodes in a season. So yeah, I pressed ahead ultimately. It was the October half term when I finally got round, after many months, to filming some of the scenes for the story. I started with the bits outside the pyramid exterior, and got all of them done over about a week towards the end of October, and, you know, to a standard that I was happy with. So that was good, because it was about a third of the story already in the can by that point. Apart from the exterior set, there's only actually the interior as well, the King's Chamber with the sliding wall, both parts of that, the Cyberman bit and the bit with the casket that, you know, the people lie in. So in that regard, it wasn't actually too complicated. It was just a case of getting the scenes blocked on those two sets. I managed to return to the project once school had broken up for Christmas, and complete the story over a 2-week period in December, building that interior set, and then, like I say, filming all those scenes. I didn't want to release a trailer until I was sure that the project was on the road to completion, as it were. So I did that on Christmas Day, as has kind of become traditional with my Christmas specials. I've done it every year since about 2014 or 15, releasing a trailer and then the episode itself on New Year's Eve or thereabouts. We've had Genesis of the Cybermen, Hulock, and now this as well. Even though it's not a Christmas special, I thought I might as well release it around that time, just to capitalise upon all the kind of jazz that goes around doing a Christmas episode for a figure adventure, a holiday special if you like. So I decided on a kind of New Year's Eve release date, ultimately choosing Saturday the 30th of December, and yeah, I managed to get it all done in time. All the filming, all the editing, and the voice recordings as well, they've been done in advance, apart from my own bits as the Doctor and the Cybermen. And I'll just take a moment to, you know, thank the people that voiced for me. There was Mina VA playing Clara Oswald. I'd seen her in a couple of other figure adventures, notably Miles Taylor's stuff, Siley 1010, and I thought, you know, I might as well get her on board for this if she's up for it, because it's so much better to have a female playing Clara, or the female companion, instead of just voice shifting a male adolescent teenager. It doesn't work in the same way. So I was pleased to have her on board for the project, to give a slightly more authentic female voice for Clara. As for Jenkins and Stevenson and Jones Sr., they were actually sourced from one of the choirs that my dad runs. He conducts a number of choirs, and I was stuck for some voice actors for these parts. I wanted to have the gravitas of an older person playing the role, again, as opposed to just an adolescent teenager. I wanted to have a kind of middle-aged male or, you know, whatever is right for those characters. So he managed to source some tenors and basses in that choir who kindly donated their voices for me after a night's rehearsal, and I recorded them on my phone and got them done around Easter, actually. That was done at an earlier stage in all the filming and later stages of production. I've already mentioned how I think that the soundtrack in particular is one of the elements that contributes to that sense of storytelling, and I made the brave choice for this figure adventure to do the whole soundtrack from scratch. Usually I just use stock music that was designed for other Doctor Who episodes, you know, the Series 8 soundtrack, something like that. But I'd reached the point where, for the stories that I wanted to tell, I couldn't justify just using stock music that, like I say, was just designed for another scene in another episode. It didn't make sense, and I wanted this story to have its own unique soundtrack and unique feel to it, with familiar themes like the 12th Doctor's theme, like the Cybermen theme, but with a kind of Egyptian sort of spin on it as well, just to give it that unique audio landscape, if you like. So yeah, I set to work on that again, slightly earlier than the filming, kind of over the Easter summer period, just doing a few cues to test bits and bobs and seeing how that would work out. As I say, I used some themes from the show, the 12th Doctor's theme for heroic, doctorish moments, some variations of the Cyberman theme, which I'm especially proud of, with that Egyptian spin, just to give something really unique, and there's hints of that main motif, da 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 da, woven throughout some of the earlier cues. The very first cue, for example, the pre-title scene, it's there if you're listening out, and then in the slightly later ones as well, building to that reveal halfway through the story when you get that majestic appearance first of the three Cybermen and then of Cyber Khufu. Those are a few of the cues that I'm most proud of, really. If you're interested, I have released the soundtrack separately as a separate video upload. It's not been seen too much, not had that many views, which, you know, is fine, but given the effort that went into it, I would appreciate it if people did just spend a moment to listen out to it, because, you know, it is all the individual layering of the different musical instruments, different parts, working out the harmonies, weaving in the themes, and coming up with new ones. But having said that, it was one of the most enjoyable parts of the production for me, and I hope viewers got that from the story. I hope that for you as well, it enhanced the feel of the episode and just raised it that little bit higher as a more high-quality production. Going hand in hand with the original soundtrack, I also decided to make my own variation of the theme tune, the Doctor Who theme tune, and the title sequence as well, again, just to give the story a more unique feel. It's slightly controversial, you know, to have an individual, unique title sequence for a Doctor Who episode. We've seen it a little bit in Series 7, Part 1, but otherwise, apart from Sleep No More, which was an exception, every other episode has had that same title sequence to match the era that it's a part of. And, you know, I just thought that I'd like to kind of emphasise the different genres and styles of the episodes and give each one a really distinct, unique identity. And you don't really get that from just having a generic title sequence. And I also think the title sequence should be part of the story itself in a way. It should hint at what's to come and actually be part of the story itself, I think. As if the TARDIS is travelling from the location that it's in, the pre-title sequence, through the vortex to Egypt or to wherever. And so for that, I just used some stock imagery and video of Egypt from some documentaries I found on YouTube, and the usual kind of stock vortex bits for Doctor Who and the logo, and put all that together and came up with something that I was really pleased with, actually. It's, again, one of my favourite parts from the production, and one of the parts that I'm most proud of. And like the soundtrack, that too is available to watch separately, should you wish to do so. As we near the end of this confidential episode, I'd just like to take a moment to thank you all for your support and kind words about this episode. You know, obviously, it goes without saying, it does just all mean the world, and, you know, I never take any of it for granted. Everyone that's liked and commented on this video and just watched it full stop. Because at the end of the day, that's why I do it. You know, I'm a storyteller, and I want to tell these stories and then gauge that response back and do it for people's enjoyment, ultimately, I suppose. So it really makes me happy when people comment to say that they've enjoyed it and they appreciate all the hours that go in to making one of these. Because it's so many more hours of work going into one of these than a quick review that can suddenly get 1, 2, 3,000 views in a day, just because of clickbait terms and keywords. And you know, that's okay, you can't do anything about that. It's a shame that stuff like this, original stories and things, don't get more views and more attention as much as reviews and things. But anyway, I think it's important to have a balance of both types of video on my channel, because, like I say, it's all about storytelling. I'm interested in writing and things, and I think if I'm reviewing Doctor Who episodes, it's only right that I give my view on what kind of episodes I would write, you know. So this is what it is, really, and I think it does go hand in hand with the reviews. Hopefully, there's that sense of coherence, and it's not just, oh, he's done reviews for a year and suddenly he's churning out another figure adventure. Hopefully you can kind of see the link there and why I think it's important to do both types of video, and why that's important to me. As for the future of figure adventures on my channel, the future of the quest for Scovox, I have 2 more stories planned for the series, I can confirm that much. I have kind of considered whether maybe I might have to do them as audios instead, because of time constraints. Although, you know, like I said, I went through the same dilemma with this story, and ultimately I decided that I wanted to retain that visual element. So I probably will end up getting round to doing them one day. Scripts do exist for both of them. I know quite clearly what's happening in the 4th one, and a little bit less clear for the 5th one. But the vague outline is there. I do have a scheme and a story arc that links all 5 of these stories, even the first 2 that were made back in 2015 and 16 with the 3.75-inch figures. They're all connected. So you'll have to wait and see how they're connected. If I had to tease the next one, just to give it a tantalising little glimpse into what it might be about, and interpret this as you will. We must not look at goblin men, we must not buy their fruits. Who knows upon what soil they fed their hungry, thirsty roots? Yes, interpret that as you will. Take it literally if you like, or metaphorically, or whatever else. But that piece of Rossetti poetry does appear in the story, and is significant thematically in a way, if that makes sense. But hopefully it will do by the time I get round to doing it. So, as I say, there are scripts that exist. When will I do it? Well, I'm in year 13 at school at the moment, which means A-level exams, but after that, the summer holidays, hoping to do it then, really. At least one of them. I will just have to see how busy I am, because last summer I didn't get anything done. And also, motivation levels as well, because it has to be the right time to do it. You have to be motivated to do it, otherwise you don't do it to the right standard. You know, you don't want to be looking back and thinking, oh, I could have done this so much better. So I guess we'll just have to wait until all those different factors fall into place, and you know, I can make these stories and release them to you guys. So you'll have to wait and see what that means. But otherwise, again, thank you so much for all the kind words about the King's Chamber. It really does mean the world. Thank you ever so much for watching this FA Confidential video. And if you have any questions about anything I've brought up, or just any general aspects of the production, then I'll be happy to answer them in the comments. I'll see you very soon for some more new videos. But otherwise, it's goodbye from me. So bye for now, guys.